The wheel of time turns, and ages come and pass, leaving memories that become legend. Legend fades to myth, and even myth is long forgotten when the age that gave it birth comes again. Hi, I'm Nikki Reese. Welcome to the Read with Reese book club. We are talking about Eye of the World, which is our spring book. And stay tuned to the end for a special announcement for our indie summer lineup. I'm here with my friend Inez.
Hello.
Hi.
That was my intro.
This book took me quite a long time to get through, several months. It was such a long book, and I'm so excited to talk about it today. Uh, it's kind of a very traditional fantasy story. I'll give a basic summary. It basically starts with these youths in this really, really small remote town where the culture is so different than everywhere else that they go to in this world. And this woman who has magic shows up to their town. And then these monsters come in and they destroy a huge portion of the town because they're looking for three of the boys that live there. And so the woman who has magic takes them and a girl from the village off on this journey towards the place that she's from called Tarvalin, which is where the magic women live, because she thinks that they'll be safe from the dark one there who sent the monsters. And so they end up going on this whole long adventure. At some point, this woman from back from their village who kind of is responsible for them, even though they're kind of almost adults now. She followed through to try and find them because she doesn't want people from her town going missing. And so she ends up joining them too. And they all get separated at some point, which is very typical in a fantasy novel. The main characters all like just kind of go everywhere. And they go through a lot of different trials and problems and mishaps, and eventually they end up regrouping all together in the capital and making their way to the finale, which happens at the Eye of the World. And there's some fun foreshadowing at the very beginning of the book about all this stuff that's going to happen to them, where one of the kids in the town, not the main ones, is asking Rand, the main character, about wanting to go out and find adventures. And Rand's like, of course I want adventures, but where do I find an adventure? In the Two Rivers, which is where they're from. And so what happens, he ends up leaving the Two Rivers and going on this huge adventure. And like with all fantasy novels, it starts with a prologue.
Okay.
But not just one, two. There's two prologues in this one.
Jeez. Yeah, I also want to tell people who are watching this and wondering why I'm just sitting here blankly is that I did not even attempt to read this book. Made a zero effort to even try to read it. So that's why Nikki is explaining everything so that I can get caught up on what actually happens. And apparently, okay, so two prologues. How long are the prologues? Are we talking chapter length or are we talking more?
The first one is like a longer chapter, and then the second one is like a short chapter. And I actually kind of like it because I just think it's weird that they're both before like chapter one. But the first one does a really good job of setting up the Two Rivers and the characters that are from there. And you get to see from the eyes of the girl, Egwin, who's on the adventure with them. And she's carrying water for like a special event that they do where they carry water because it's like they raise sheep and they shear them and everything. And it's really interesting to start out from such a small perspective since the rest of the story is so huge. And you get to see Egwin, who really, really wants for her hair to get braided because that means like you're a woman in this society. And so she wants to be like one of the youngest women to get her hair braided and so she's like being really competitive and stuff. And that plays thematically really well with the story as a whole, because the story is very much a coming of age story, that I think will probably keep playing out as the books go along, because they didn't really like finish that process at the end of this book. It's a very long series. Um, but that setting up that idea of coming of age so early, I think does really well with the rest of the book. And then the second one sets up the lore of the world, and how everything got as messed up as it is now. And that is where the quote that I started the live stream came in at. Uh, it talks about one of the because there used to be men and women that both could access the one power, the true source. But a long time ago, one of the men who could touch the source got corrupted, and it corrupted the source for men. And so now only women can access the one power without like going crazy or having bad things happen. And so that creates a really interesting world building dynamic. um,
Yeah.
I do have a question for you, since you do read fantasy. um, how do you feel about maps?
Uh, I think I like the concept of a map and I like seeing them when I open the book, but I almost never refer back to it and I definitely don't remember what it looks like. So it's kind of like a bonus, but I
Mm,
very rarely use it as like I think as it's intended, or I don't know, I don't really use it as
mm,
part of the story. It's just kind of a
mm.
thing that's there, like a nice cover illustration or something. So I don't like when a story is very dependent on it and you need to keep flipping back to the map or
Yeah.
something like that, then it kind of loses me.
It might just
Yeah,
be
how
me,
about
because I
you?
do really like looking at the maps and stuff and referring back to them. But this book, I was constantly going back to the map and like trying to like figure out where they were on it and like everything, because they went through such a huge like portion of the map in their journey. And so I was like constantly trying
Mm,
to figure out. But I do generally like really like to refer back to them. And that's something
yeah.
that really bothers me about reading digitally, because if you have like a print book, you can just easily flip open the front. But this time I had to like, scroll, really far back to find that.
Yeah, and then you lose it.
Yeah.
There's just the story. Sorry, I've got Slack notifications and I don't know how to turn them off. So if you hear beeping, that's me. This story, at least the way you described it, the two rivers sounds a lot like the Shire, and it
Yeah,
sounds
it's
a
very
bit
similar. Yeah. There
Hobbit-ish, and then also that they split up on different
uh,
adventures. Sounds a bit
yeah. It's
Hobbit-ish.
it echoes a lot with other big fantasy stories like that. Though my husband says that the future books become a little bit more original and less like following that kind of formula. So it'd be interesting to
Yeah.
see what the future books are like.
Also, when was this book written? I mean, if you know, I mean, we could also just Google it, but do you know
Yeah,
when it was written
I
or
don't know off the
published?
top of my head. I think it was published within like a few-ish years of the first Game of Thrones book, but I'm not sure what
Mm,
decade that was.
let me see. I also another thing that came to mind was the women only power,
Mm,
which reminded me of I watched Dune on the plane back.
mhm.
And I I think to be fair, I only got through half of it and then I was getting kind of motion sickness, so I had to turn it off. But I really, really wanted to see the end. I didn't think I would like it as much as I did end up liking it. And there was kind of this like woman only power, at least in the first half.
Mm,
Yeah, I only saw half and I've never read the book. So this is coming from a very novice perspective,
mhm.
but I just thought that was interesting to hear that after I just saw this in Dune.
Yeah, it is really interesting. And I really love that the kind of Gandalf like character in the book is a woman. She's one of the Aes Sedai, the women who have magic. And forgive me if I pronounce anything wrong, because some of these names and like words are like so like unique. But yeah, Moraine is her name. And She's really fascinating. She's my favorite character in the book, I'd say, because there's a lot of depth to her, and we don't really get to see all the sides of her, and so she's kind of like an enigma. Like she's helping these people and protecting them, but she also has her own like ulterior motives because she wants to fight the Dark One, and so in a way, she's kind of using these young people, and so there's questions of ethics there and whatnot. But she's very wise, and it's really cool to see her use the one power, and she gives some really good monologues where like I didn't think that I would like them as much as I did, but she goes into this whole monologue about like stuff that happened like thousands of years ago in this world, and like it was actually really interesting. And I just love that little like question that sits in the back of your mind as you read about like where's she coming from when she's doing the things that she's doing. Um
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I just checked and it was published in 1990.
Yeah.
Um, so I actually thought it was um older than that for some reason,
Me
but
too. I did as well. Uh, I was just as surprised when I first looked that up, and then I, forgot the date obviously, but it is really interesting.
yeah. Cool. Were there any other characters that spoke to you or um that left an impression?
Um because there's so many characters in this book, and like literally everyone is named. I'm not even joking about that. Like there's this one instance where like two of them stop at like this inn, and like literally everybody that's there is named.
Oh gosh.
It's just like, okay. There's so many names, but the cool thing about the names is that they all feel like they're in the same world, which I think was really like cool of Robert Jordan. I think that he did a good job of, world building in all those little small ways.
Yeah.
But I really of the boys, I didn't really like Randall that much. I thought he was just kind of bland, even though he's supposed to be like the main guy. And Matt is the mischief maker, and so that's kind of fun, but he's also he does the whole thing of don't touch the things in this special place, and he touches it and gets cursed and stuff, so he spends a lot of the book being like affected by that, and that kind of isn't so fun to read, for me at least. Of the boys, I really liked Perrin, who he is kind of discovering that he has wolf powers, or he can like understand them and everything, and it's kind of like this taboo power because it's even older than kind of the one power, and so a lot of people look down on it, and so he's kind of like rejecting that, until like it kind of gets to a point towards the end of the book where he's starting to accept it some more, but that's a huge struggle for him. And I really just liked that he was kind of more of a introspective character. um I I like his the way that he has a lot of like interior thoughts where he like really goes deep into certain things when you get his perspective that I like. Um and he also has this point when he is with this group called the Tinkers, who are kind of like the Romani a little bit in the story, where they travel around, and they kind of have their own culture, and he really like struggles with the ideas that they put out because the Tinkers, they very like intentionally don't ever like do anything violent or anything like that. Like even if somebody does something to them, they can't like defend themselves, and so Perrin really struggles with that and tries to come to grips with it because he's from a place where like protecting yourself is kind of the way things work. And then that kind of plays into another like mental struggle he has later, where him and the girl from the Two Rivers Egwin, they're like running away from these evil ravens, and he has this moment where he thinks that the ravens are like half a second away from getting her and killing her in a very brutal way, and he's like, do I kill her now to like give her like a swift death, so that she doesn't have to get tortured and picked apart. And thankfully, like, they get like rescued like right after that point, but it leads to a really interesting scene in a reflection later with another character who's with them helping them, who finds him about to like throw his axe into the water because he's like, I can't, like, I could have done something really horrible with this. I can't keep it. And the guy says, "You'll use it, boy, and as long as you hate using it, you will use it more wisely than most men would. Wait, if you ever don't hate it any longer, then will be the time to throw it as far as you can and run the other way." And I just really liked the poignancy of all that and the lesson that he learned. And I think his struggles were much more like personal and
Mhm. Yeah.
clearly laid out. Um, and because this is a coming of age story, they pretty much all have something that they're struggling with as they come into adulthood. For Rand, that's his parentage. He finds out really early into the book that his dad might not be his dad, and so that's really like a struggle for him, but it never really gets fully resolved in this book. um and Matt mostly just struggles with his impulsivity. So that's why I like Perrin's plot arc the most, because I feel like his got a little bit more resolved, and um it was a little bit deeper than just like something random he found out. um and I think it played better with the themes of identity and where do you belong, and um discovering powers and new ways of thinking, all of that. I think it played in really well with his story. And then I also really liked Egwin, though uh there was a few places where like she bothered me, I think. But it was mostly like I feel like when I was reading this book that the author tried really hard to create this really interesting gender dynamic, and in a lot of ways it's successful in like being really interesting, and allows for like really strong female characters, but there's points where maybe it feels a little bit weak, you know.
Like the female characters aren't fully developed, or it's
Yeah,
kind of
or
leaning too much on this one power, kind of magic power.
just kind of like uh there's points when they don't feel as yet as developed. There's points when um they feel a little bit more stereotypical, but
Mhm.
it's not so prevalent that I couldn't enjoy reading the book. And I think that that's a product of the time,
Yeah.
a lot has changed in the past few decades. uh,
Yeah.
but I liked that when Moraine, she takes the boys, because the boys are who the dark one is after. Egwin shows up and she's like, "I'm not letting you leave without me. Like, what are you doing?" And so she just kind of invites herself along on this journey. And then she's kind of discovering her um kind of powers. Moraine kind of notices that she has the ability to touch the true source, which means that she has to go to Tarvalin to get magic training or she'll die. And um and she can't really do a whole lot with her powers because she hasn't been trained and whatnot. But Moraine said that like she's going to be one of the most powerful Aes Sedai if she gets trained. So there's a lot of potential there for her. And she's also discovering what it means to be a woman. In her small village, it means if you braid your hair, then you're a woman. But nobody outside of that small space braids their hair. That's not like the mark of being a woman in those cultures. And so when she comes across Moraine, and Moraine's starting to teach her magic and stuff, she starts to kind of adopt to her way of being. And so she stops braiding her hair and um, kind of idolizing Moraine. And um her journey towards like understanding what womanhood is like is really interesting, and it's something that I think a lot of women can relate to, because in different societies, different cultures, there's different ways to be a woman, and coming to terms with what that means in the world, I think is something that a lot of women go through. And there's this really interesting scene where when they're with the Tinkers, there's like an older woman in the Tinker group who kind of pulls her aside and is advising her and stuff. And so then Egwin has this funny conversation with Perrin where she's all like, Ela was giving me advice on being a woman. And then Perrin says, advice? Nobody tells us how to be men. We just are. And so then Egwin says, that's probably why you make such a bad job of it. I thought that was really funny.
Yeah, fair play, fair play.
So I think that she has like a good arc that I think is pretty relatable. And I think that there's also some really good themes about trust. There's so many different like figures that they come across who they're constantly trying to figure out whether they can trust them or not. There's the Aes Sedai who Maureen, she's helping them, but they're suspicious of her the entire time. And Rand's dad tells him, like, towards the very beginning, you see, lad, Aes Sedai are tricksome. They don't lie, not right out. But the truth an Aes Sedai tells you is not always the truth you think it is. Which kind of reminds me of the Fae, where, like, they're kind of weaselly and they're not necessarily, like, lying, but they know how to, like, twist words and stuff. So I think that that's kind of an interesting thing. And I really liked this quote in it about it's just kind of like a little lesson that they learn along the way. The quickest to harm a stranger are the soonest to think a stranger will harm them. So that's kind of, it plays into that whole like trust and, theme that's in the book.
Yeah, I
So
think
yeah,
that's a good one. I think with friends, it can often be like that. If you're talking with a friend or I don't know, family or something, and they're always accusing people of like tricking them or not trusting
mm,
people, it's often because they are kind of backstabby themselves. And
mm,
so they kind of project that onto other people. Whereas if someone's really good natured and wouldn't do that, then they usually expect other people to be really good natured and not
uh,
do that, and sometimes naively. So I think that
uh,
there is that kind of um, way that we see other things, like, or
mm,
we see other people's intentions like as a reflection of our own.
mm-hmm.
So yeah,
I think
I
that's
think
very true. So yeah, overall, I really liked the book. I thought it was a really like dynamic journey, and for how many characters there were, I felt like I connected to them a lot, and except for maybe Rand. I thought there were a lot of strong women, even though there were a few places where it was kind of stereotypical. But I thought that it was nice that there were so many women on the journey and stuff, even though the focus was on the boys more when it came to like the grand scheme of things. And my biggest problem with the book is the ending. And do you mind spoilers? And as I won't
I
like
have
full out, but
well, I don't, because I
yeah,
have no intention of reading the
yeah,
book and in any time in the near future, and I don't even think I'll watch the series anytime soon. So by the
yeah.
time I get around to it, I'll probably have forgotten.
Totally fair. So my big problem with the ending of this book is how it's such a chosen one ending. It's like it happens. It all happens so very fast, and I kind of wish that we knew more about like the eye of the world sooner in the book. Like it keeps getting mentioned, but they never really like discuss what it is or what they need to do to like get there, or why they need to get there really, until like it just all happens all at once. And then the thing that like saves the day is Rand just like magically like doing a bunch of magic like plus 1000 magic points, and
Yeah.
it's like you haven't gotten any training. Like there's hints throughout the book that Rand can do magic. Like his horse is magically like able to like withstand like longer, riding already. And there's like a time when like he calls down a lightning bolt unintentionally during like a tense moment, but like literally like that same chapter, they're all like how Egwene, her magic is puny, she can't do anything because she hasn't been trained and whatnot,
Yeah.
and she's supposed to like be someday one of the most powerful Aes Sedai. And then like literally like later that chapter, Rand, who's got no training at all, just like bam does like
Yeah.
absolutely all this magic stuff that he needs to do to win. And um and it's just like I get that like maybe it might be explained better in like future books, and like he might be like the most powerful, which is how I think it's going to work, but still like he hasn't had any training at this point, none.
Yeah, that's why I don't really like well, there's a lot of reasons why I don't really like the chosen one trope, which I've talked about before. But yeah, I don't know. I think that if you're gonna set up the magic system where
Mm,
you need training and you need to learn, then
mm,
it just undercuts all that. Then it's like, why
mm,
did we follow this other
mm.
character doing all this learning if that's not
Yeah,
even going to be what sets that character up to win the battle or whatever?
yeah.
And if we didn't need to do all that training, why not just cut all of that out
and
and then skip straight to, "Oh, I do magic now," the end?
and that's kind of something that bothered me personally, is that, and I could be totally wrong because there's so many books in this series, so things might develop later, but like how I read it almost is that it seems like the women need to train but the men don't, because they have like these men sometimes who will start using the power, which they shouldn't because it drives them crazy and like bad things happen, but like a lot of times like they just kind of pop up without getting training. And then with Rand doing this, like it kind of makes me wonder if like the men like don't need training, like they're either more powerful or have like more like
Mm.
raw like natural control, and I don't, that kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah. The only thing that I would say would redeem this is that if he knew that he would, go insane because he's using this power, and then he decides to do it anyways, and then in a future book, he pays the price by actually starting to go insane or seeing the consequence. That's the only thing
Yeah.
that would redeem this in my
Yeah.
mind, I
Because
think.
like it
I mean,
was
I haven't read it. I haven't read any of the sequels, so I maybe that's where he's going with it.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it was like fun to read him doing it. Like it was like really like, flashy and stuff, but I really only like when somebody like throws out like random like magic points like that if there's like a situational reason, like either they hit a certain age and so now they can use X and Y magic, or maybe somebody that they love is like immediately in danger and they just like snap react like that. I think makes more sense, but like this felt so much more like just a chosen one, like he's special. And it's just
Yeah,
like
he's just special. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and I love how
I
it's the most bland one who gets to be the special one.
Yeah, I feel that's always the chosen one, it's always the character that you really couldn't say much about their personality, the Harry
Uh,
Potter, the Luke
yeah.
Skywalker, you're just kinda like,
They
I don't know,
exist.
he's there. Yeah, he's there. He's not like the Han Solo where you, like, have a sense of their
Yeah.
personality or his
Uh,
flaws, or I don't know, the Hermione or Ron or something where you're like, "Okay, I have a sense of their strengths and flaws." It's just kind of
yeah.
like the bland one is the chosen one. So bland.
Uh. Alright, so let's take a look now at Indie Summer. You want to
Yes.
introduce what books we'll be reading?
Well, that's a good question. If I can remember, well, I've started reading the first one, which is for this month, and I'm almost halfway through, so I'm actually just flying through it. I'm really enjoying it. It's
Yeah.
The Marked Princess. I don't remember the author. God.
I think it's I don't know how to say her last name, but EP Stavs is one of
Okay,
our friends
good,
on Twitter.
good. And yeah, I'm flying through. I'm already halfway done. It's pretty short. It's YA, and
Uh-huh.
I find that I found it's very well. I have a lot of things to say about it, but some of it is kind of I think I've outgrown YA, and some
Uh-huh.
of the YA tropes just make me roll my eyes. I'm like, can't deal with this. But I feel in terms of the writing itself and the way it's edited, it's
Uh-huh.
very well done. And if
Yeah.
I didn't know that it was self-published or indie published, I don't know how she actually published it. I would never guess that. Like that's
Yeah.
I would assume it was traditionally published. Um, so that's the first one.
Yeah. And
And
then
the second
in
one.
August we'll be reading Darling There Are Wolves in the Woods by LV Russell.
Yeah, I like the cover of this one, and I
It's
like
gorgeous and she
the
made it herself.
oh, really? How did she
Yes.
make it? Like, did she shoot the photos, or is it kind
I
of like
don't
a stock
know.
image?
I'm not
It
sure.
looks really nice, and I
Yeah.
like the kind of tone, the little cheeky, ness about the "Darling, there are wolves in the woods" type of title. So I'm very interested in that one. And then I know for September, which is not actually part of summer, but it's part of summer when you're doing everything a few months late. Our world.
Well, I mean, the equinox isn't until, like, late September, so
So, we have to follow the equinox. It's all planned. It's not just 'cause it started this date. So I think we can figure out a way to do crowdsource ideas or something for the 3rd book, when it starts to get a little bit closer because, yeah, I'd be interested to hear what recommendations people have. I haven't read a lot of indie books myself, so be curious to see what other people recommend um, and try those out because, yeah, I've been really enjoying The Marked Princess. I mean, for a YA, but I think
Yeah,
my complaints are very much, like, with the YA genre or
yeah,
category as a whole.
and that book
So
fits very much into the genre.
yeah, which is actually kind of a positive in
Yeah,
terms of what the author was able to do, and, you want if you're looking for a YA book, you feel like reading YA, it should be YA, know?
yeah.
Or if you're looking for romance, it should be romance, so can't really fault the writer with it, but I do have some things that the YA genre not genre, but the YA category just makes me like,
Uh,
"You guys."
I think for that for, like, the YA tropes, I I can simultaneously enjoy the trope while also cringing at it. I have
Yeah.
this weird, like, reaction to it where I kind of have both reactions at once.
Yeah, like, I think there's something I mean, I think that's the thing with tropes is there's something comforting about it.
Yeah.
You know kind of what's going on. It's kind of a kind of getting you to, "Okay, now I know where this is going." So there's that kind of good side. A and then I think with YA because the tropes are the books are written for 12 to 18-year-olds.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of things that 12 to 18-year-olds are interested in and like I would have liked at that same age, but now I'm not in
Uh-huh.
that age group. And so it's kinda like looking, when I walk past a teenager and I'm just like, "Oh, why? Why did you do that? You're gonna regret wearing those jeans," or whatever
It's like the
whatever.
secondhand embarrassment.
Yeah, where I'm like, "Oh, you're gonna regret that someday," but you can't tell someone that, like, not to do something. Because when I was a teenager, if someone told me, "Don't do this thing, you're gonna regret it," I'd be like, "No, I won't. I will never." I'm gonna love my UGG boots and my whatever is cool right now. I need to get them, and then obviously now I look back and I'm just like, "Oh my gosh." So so it's kind of hard, I think, to now be in the age that I'm in and then going back and reading YA, and, yeah, you kinda get that cringe as well where you're like, Oh, why? But, it's written for teenagers, and
Yeah.
um it is a really light read. It's really light. It's just the pages are flying by, and I'm having a lot of fun reading it, and I've been in a really bad reading slump, so if Marked Princess is gonna get me out, then I will take it. No questions asked.
Yeah. Yeah, so everyone, just drop down in the comments what book you want us to read for September, and I'm excited to talk about Mark Princess this month.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us, everyone.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
I don't know